Texas Football Podcast, sponsored by Ranch Masters Ranch and Home Realty. Thank you to L4 Media for doing this. And today we got Bryce Cherry on, who is the sports director or sports editor at the Waco Trib. How you doing, Bryce?
Good, Kenny. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Kenny, I can't hear you anymore. After your first introduction, I lost you.
How about now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. So we'll have to edit that out. We'll be all right. So we start off our show with the Matt Stepp question of the week. And of course, we're going to ask him about the Robinson Glen Rose game. So our question was, and I'll let you answer it too, what your thoughts. Looking back at the Robinson Glen Rose game, what does that tell you about each team? You know, is Robinson a little bit better than you thought, or maybe Glen Rose not as good? And how does this going to affect what you think the playoff situation is going to end up being with District 12 and 4AD2. So Matt said, I think it's a little bit of both. Robinson showed when they are operating at peak efficiency, they can play with anyone in 4AD2. Glen Rose's defense, which has been a concern in the past years, again showed vulnerability. and it may be in for a real test this week against Alvarado, and I agree. And as far as the playoff scenarios, he thinks right now it'd probably be La Vega, China Spring, Colony, Robinson, Lorena 6, and Gatesville getting left out. So we actually talked about that, and thank you, Matt Stepp, for the question of the week. We talked about in our preview, you know, there's a greater than zero chance that, you know, Robinson or Gatesville could have snuck in that fourth playoff spot in District 12 because, you know, you look at Lorena, they're replacing a lot. I think they've already swapped quarterbacks. The Blanchett's back at quarterback. I don't know if Smedsheimer got hurt or they just made a change. What were your thoughts going in? Did you think that, you know, that possibly could happen, that Robinson or Gatesville could sneak in that fourth spot?
Yeah, to me, this is arguably the most competitive district in Central Texas, top to bottom. You have all 6 teams that made the playoffs last year. Obviously at different levels. China Spring and La Vega were 4A-D1 last year. Lorena was in 3A. But all of them had really good teams that they were building off of with some, you know, some talented players coming back. We ended up picking in our preseason projections, we picked La Vega, China, Conley and Lorena to make the playoffs with Gatesville and Robinson as the odd teams out. To me, the win over Glen Rose was probably the most eye-opening result of the season thus far in Central Texas. We've written a lot about it this week, and talked about it on our own podcast. What it does for that district, and does it make Robinson suddenly the favorite in a district with all those other teams that I just rattled off? Here's what I'll say. I mean, I just think that every week in that district's going to be a battle. And Robinson has shown, you know, with this result that, as Matt said, I think it could play with anyone if it plays its game. Obviously, Evan Moreno went off over 500 yards of total offense, or just all-purpose yards, I guess, in that game. You're probably not going to get that out of him every week, but but you know, clearly he's a good weapon. Bryce McCurdy's a talented young quarterback. So yeah, I just think, you know, Chris Lancaster has them on the right trajectory, and they're going to be a tough out. So you cannot dismiss anyone in that district.
Yeah, Coach Lancaster, man, we talked about it last year. Like, if you're going to start a program, he's one of those kids, those coaches that I think would be in the running. He did really well. Well, he was an OC at Troy when they had Herbacek or Herbacek. Went over to Little River Academy, did well over there, and then Robinson. So he can coach him up. Speaking of Moreno, like he didn't start. Like he came in for there was it Mr. Knight. He got hurt, and he was kind of like the backup coming in and just went off.
It was a breakout game for him, and clearly they found something. A guy that they want to get the ball a little bit more to. So yeah, sometimes that happens over the course of a season. Is you find out, wow, this kid's ready for prime time.
Well, this kind of reminds me, like this. Usually, if you look at, I was looking at Stats Plus this morning. Usually, you got quarterbacks with just all these numbers, and this kind of, to me, is like the year of the running back. You got the Grossbeck kid, Bryson Rowlands, the Whitney Tate, Jaden Lucky at Troy is like turned that team in a. And we'll talk about them in a little bit. They're not relying on McMurtry and Ketchum to score 50 points a game now. They actually got a running back. So a lot of good running backs here in the Central Texas area. And I know I left several off, but let's start on our review. So we did Robinson. Let's go with a game that I thought was going to be a little bit closer with Grossbeck and Lexington. I read your write up and I looked at the papers write up and I looked at Max Preps and I didn't see any stat line for Jordan Smith. I wonder if he played in that game. I know they had you had Trent Platt's stats in there, but I didn't see anything about Jordan Smith. Do you know if he played or?
I don't know if he played, but he's obviously been a big weapon for the Goats.
Yeah,
along with Trent Platt. Grossbeck, it was obviously their first loss of the year, but that's a really good Lexington team. So I don't think that that's any loss to be, ashamed about. And I, applaud the Goats for challenging themselves in the non-district against a team like Lexington. I think they're going to be fine. They got Rockdale this week. That won't be an easy game, but a team, I think, not on the same level as Lexington. So, assuming everyone's healthy out there in Grossbeck, which we don't obviously get injury reports, but we do try to ask around on some of that. Assuming everyone's healthy, I think, Grossbeck, they've got a high-powered attack and have put up a lot of points this year. So they're a team to watch.
Yeah, and you look at Lexington and kind of like what we just talked about with Troy, they've got a running back in that Noah Wright Smith. He went for 200. So, Case Evans, all the film I haven't seen him live, but I've seen a lot of film. Kid's really accurate. He's really composed. Like, you don't know if he just threw a 70-yard touchdown or he got sacked for a 10-yard loss. The way he acts on the field, he doesn't get riled up. But now he's got a running back with him, and I'm with you. They're a tremendous team. I think they're due to make a pretty good run in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And let's go Crawford Axtell. Speaking of losing people, Levi Leathers was out early in that game. I talked to Coach Horn yesterday, just text, and they really like the Fetch kid. He's like, just unfortunately he's been behind Levi, but he's like, the kid can run the ball really well. He's got a laser for an arm, and they feel pretty good. I think Levi's going to be out for a little bit. So they feel pretty good about him, and he's got weapons in Tyson Michelle and Kelby Hollingsworth and Colin Horn. So looks like they may be all right.
Yeah. DJ Ramirez was at that game for us. And, first of all, it's very unfortunate for Levi Leathers. Mm-hmm. I mean, very promising young player, athlete. I mean, he's a great baseball player as well. Just a sophomore. Looked like probably a broken ankle or something. I mean, so not good news, but yeah, she said the same thing. She was really impressed with AJ Fetch, and he obviously stepped up in a big time situation. Axel's got a lot of speed. I think that's going to help them a lot. I mentioned the competitiveness of 12-4A. I don't think there's a lot of separation between, 1 through whatever it is, 7 in Axel's district. I think even when you go down to like I think Valley Mills and Dawson are sitting there at like 1-3. Those are playoff teams from last year. I mean, so I don't think there's a lot of separation between the teams in that district, but I do think Axtell is the favorite going in for a reason.
And talking about Crawford, I saw their JV play about I think 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and they beat a Whitney team that a lot of these kids are on varsity now. And I really didn't expect the decline that we're seeing because I thought, man, they're just reloading because I think that year they went to the regional finals or the state semifinals. We saw them play Holly and Mineral Wells, and I just figured they were going to reload, but they just. What's your thoughts on them? Just kind of a little slump, maybe.
Yeah, I do think it's a little slump. I don't think this is like the sign of a long-term thing. Crawford has been so consistent for so long. We asked this question on our podcast a couple weeks ago when Crawford was sitting there at 0-3 or whatever they were, and I just think that you do go through some down talent cycles. And here's the other thing. Crawford has played a pretty tough non-district schedule this year. With the likes of Centerville and oh gosh, who else have they played? I mean,
Anderson
obviously,
Shiro, I believe.
Yeah, Anderson Shiro, that's another one. Obviously Axtell and in some of those years that Crawford was going, 12-1 or whatever, you could knock them a little bit for their non-district schedule. So I mean, I kind of applaud Coach Jacobs and the Pirates for challenging themselves in non-district. They have Holland this week. So I think they're still going to be in the playoffs when it's all said and done in that district. I think they'll get it together. But the one thing you always worry about when a team is winless is just getting that first one on the board, just to get a little confidence, a little momentum going. Because sometimes you need that from an emotional standpoint.
Any other games last week kind of stood out to you?
There were a couple of Thursday games for our big schools that I thought, Midway and University both looked good in losses. Midway was right there with Mansfield, a tough Mansfield team on the road before Mansfield kind of took off later. And then same with University and Shoemaker playing University playing a class up there, and right in the game they had the lead late in the third quarter. Shoemaker takes scores the go ahead touchdown with about 8 minutes to go. University, with the weapons that they have, I mean, to me, they're a real sleeper team. The biggest thing I've seen, so I saw them against China Spring on a Thursday night 2 weeks ago. When they don't beat themselves, watch out, because that the first half against China Spring, they had some silly penalties and turnovers and mistakes. Second half they played clean and they were tough to stop. JD Bell, Darius Evans, that's a 1-2 punch. A lot of teams.
That is a great 1-2 punch.
Yeah, a lot of teams would envy that. And then you could pass the ball too. Savoy Nichols is really coming along as a quarterback, and London Smith draws so much attention that it allows guys like Keandre Brooks and Cade Bynum to make big plays. And then obviously London's going to get his from time to time. So they're dangerous. Probably still have a little ways to go on defense, but they're, like I said, to me, they're a sleeper team in 5A D2.
Well, speaking of JD Bell, let's go to his former team, Mart Panthers, Bremont at Mart this week. This ought to be an interesting game. I mean, I saw in y'all's article where Coach Hoffman kind of wished this game was pushed back a little bit, a few weeks, but Mart, they lost to Whitney in week one, and
Mm-hmm.
they battled back and beat a Maypro team in overtime. I think Maypro went for two and didn't get it. I think they're all right. I mean, for a D2, you shouldn't hang your head because a 3A D1 beat you. It was Whitney definitely hung their hat on that win. But what are you thinking? Bremond, pretty tough. They beat a good Cairns team earlier this year. So I think this is going to be a good matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, you kind of get the district championship game right off the bat, and I understand what Kevin Hoffman's saying when he says, "Yeah, this might be nice to have in week 10 or whatever." But yeah, it's a tough game to pick. I mean, I think you got to go with Mart at home and Mart because they're Mart. But I think both of these teams, just like last year, have the potential to go deep into the playoffs. Clearly, Mart would love to still have JD Bell on its team.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are very reliant on DeMontrell Bedlock offensively. I think they're still waiting for maybe a couple of more playmakers to emerge, but they're looking pretty stout defensively. Obviously, the loss to Whitney was, I think, humbling. I think it was also a little bit for Kevin Hoffman of. So Chad Konai was at that game for us, and it was one of those deals where he interviewed David Haynes after the game, and sometimes you'll interview the losing coach too, but he didn't see Kevin, and then he's walking out, and Kevin's right there by the gate, and so now he's kind of compelled to talk to him, and Kevin's first comment was like, "See, like he had told us, like Lou Holtz, we're not any good, blah blah blah. Well, they're still Mart. They're still number one in the state in 2A D2.
Yeah.
They're gonna be okay. But is it a state championship Mart team? I'm not sure. Time will tell. And like I said, I think they need a few more playmakers to emerge. Bremond's tough. This should be a lot of fun. Chad will actually be at this game for us too. But Bremond lost some good players off that team last year, including McLean Minor, who was a Super Centex kid. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm taking Mart probably in a relatively close game.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. They're Bremon's starting a freshman at quarterback and Sam Kozowski, so that may be something to keep an eye on.
Coach's
Uh,
son.
yep, yep. Let's go Troy Maypearl. I kind of threw this game in there because I think it's kind of a measuring stick. A team from Region 2, a team from Region 3. Troy's been lights out. I think they're probably going to finish second in that district behind Franklin. They may give Franklin a little run for their money. I know Maypearl's kind of out of your area, a little too far north. They're 3-1, and like we said earlier, they beat Mart in a overtime game. But I just really like Troy, and I really like that Jaden Lucky is running the ball so well for them, and I think that that's going to help out McMurtry because I kind of last year in Tommy Brashear's first game was at Whitney, and you saw they unveiled that spread offense, and you could really tell that the McMurtry kid could sling the ball, and I knew he was already a good baseball player. And then, I didn't know much about Reed Ketchum, but man, that kid he had a heck of a game. Hard, really fast, hard to catch. And now they got Jaden Lucky, and we talked about it. I think this just takes that offense to a next level. May need to kind of shore up the defense a little bit. They give up some points. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, obviously, Tommy Brashear's done a great job there in Troy in his, now in his second year. They're playing really well. That first game of the season when they just throttled Salado, I was like, okay, I knew Troy was going to be good, but they put up like 52 points the first game, and it's just been, one game after another like that. And I think you hit it on the head with the addition of Jaden Lucky as this running threat, I just think it offers way more balance to that offense. I mean, they we did a story on McMurtry and Ketchum, before the season, as maybe the Mahomes to Kelsey, combination of Central Texas, just in terms of very prolific.
Mm-hmm.
And here Lucky's been, to me, kind of the breakout guy, and like you said, kind of an added dimension to that offense. In terms of this game against Maypearl, it'll be a good game. Could be a shootout. If it is a shootout, I mean, I think Troy should fare well.
Yeah, Maypearl, they're always a tough team. They've got a good running back over there. Just kind of Sam Rippey. I think this is his third year over there at Maypearl and building the program. They've been solid, so it'll be interesting. Stephenville, La Vega. Man, La Vega's got a tough schedule. I don't
Yeah.
know. The first year we did the podcast, you were there at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, and I think Jay Black was talking about Mahia. And he said somebody needs to fire their schedule maker because golly, Mahia had a tough pre-district, and somebody needs to fire the Vegas schedule maker because it just doesn't get easy. But the old iron sharpens iron, and if they stay healthy through this, they should be a better team. But Steveville comes to Waco. They've got Ryan Gafford. We know about him. They got the Gentry, who's I think still committed to Tech. They got a really good running back in Wilkerson. La Vega's got Bryson Rowland. He's just been playing since he was 12 on varsity. I mean, it seems like he's been there forever. Ought to be a good one there in Waco. What do you think?
Yeah, clearly La Vega wins the award for the toughest schedule in Central Texas this year in terms of just relative to its class and who they played. We've talked a lot about that on our various podcasts. I asked Don Hyde earlier this year about it, and he was like, "Look, it's the con of being good." He said the pro of being good is that you're good, but the con of being good is nobody wants to play you.
Yeah.
And you hear that a lot, but I think it's true for teams like La Vega and Mart. Kevin Hoffman has complained about it a lot, over the years, that he can't find very many teams within his own classification to play him. Obviously, La Vega, yeah, they've been challenging themselves. Now, I don't know. I don't think Brownwood's on the same level that we've seen maybe over the years, and that was a nice kind of get back game for La Vega last week to go to Brownwood and shut them out. Stephenville is going to be, I think, on a different level, and probably, I think, too many weapons for La Vega. But to me, what La Vega has done is toughen themselves up. And I still say, even with, the Robinson win over Glen Rose, even with everything else in 12-4A, all those other good teams, the Pirates are to me, they were the preseason favorite. They're still the favorite, even if they have a few losses on their ledger, just because they're big, they're strong, they hit hard. Ethan Thompson is the anchor for that really good offensive line. He's a D1 kid. You got Roland there. As long as Roland stays healthy, that's a good sign for La Vega. Good receiver in Jabari Thornton. So, yeah, I mean, I think if La Vega plays Stephenville tough and even loses, then I think you still take a lot of good things out of that.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think La Vega's still my pick to win. And actually, I think La Vega Conley. And then I think the rest is just going to be thrown up in the air, and who knows how that finishes out. All right, last one. Let's go Marlin West at Waco ISD. I wish this was a Thursday night game. I'd like to go watch this tonight, but it's Friday. Marlin 2-2. I think they went up and played a really tough Honey Grove team, played them well. Roderick Shooters is back at quarterback. He kind of struggled early, and it's probably due to the competition of who they were playing. Had a pretty good game either last week or 2 weeks ago. Of course, they got the big stud on their defensive line, Bryson Maxwell Steele. They're playing a West team. Coach Woodard, they got a really young quarterback in Dub Crane. They've got a veteran running back in Coy Klish, is one of the fastest kids in the state in 3A. West kind of lost a heartbreaker to Hillsboro, and Hillsboro's got a really tough. I mean, they got a good defense. They gave up, I think, 28 to Troy. What do you think about this one?
I like it. I think it's a really intriguing matchup. When we were making our picks this week, I kind of stopped and paused and thought about this one for a while. There's other games where it's a little bit easier to pick. I don't think this one was quite that easy. Both teams, sitting there at 2-2, and have kind of gotten there in different ways. I mean, obviously, Marlin lost to a really good Lexington team that we've already talked about. Lost to Honeygrove, and then they've bounced back with big wins over Chilton and Hearn. So Jeff Rogers, in his first year as the Bulldogs coach, kind of gaining some momentum. And then, West opens the year with a 3 overtime loss to Robinson. Kind of just a wild game there. Then, they bounce back. They get wins over Trinity Christian and McGregor. And then a real close loss to Hillsboro last week, 12-10, kind of a defensive slugfest, I guess. Given that West is a class up from Marlin, and that they've lost to a couple of 4A teams but played them tough, overtime loss to one, 2-point loss to the other. I think I like the Trojans in this game, neutral site. And, you mentioned Bryson Maxwell Steele. To me, you'll see 2 of the best defensive linemen in Central Texas in this game. David Clander for West is pretty stinking good, too. Both those guys as preseason Super Centex kids. Bryson Maxwell Steele was our Super Centex Defensive Player of the Year last year, and has just been wrecking backfields again. So should be fun, but I do like West in this game. I know Marlin will be excited to get its stadium renovations done so they can play, some home games. Happened to drive by there, a couple weeks ago, and it looked like they still had some work to do. So I hope they're making some progress.
Any other games this week kind of stick out that kind of interest you?
I mean, I'm on that Midway beat. My daughter's on the drill team, so I'm at those games pretty much every week. And I've been thoroughly impressed with the job that Joe Gillespie's doing. Panthers are 3-1. I think have a legit shot to get to 9-1. I mean, seriously, they obviously still have some work to do, and this District 12 6A opener is going to be not going to be an easy one. Going down to Leo Buckley and playing Harker Heights. That's been a good rivalry last few years, Midway and Heights. But I think the big question coming into the season was how are they going to replace Ty Brown? He was, to me, the kind of the probably the key to Midway's success last year, because they hadn't had that level of play at quarterback in a few seasons. Cash Pullen has stepped in, done a good job. They've got a great receiver in Tyler Scythe. They've got a stud running back, Lathan Wissington, who's just a sophomore, getting D1 looks. And, like every coach, Joe Gillespie always talks about the O-line, when you start talking about the running game, and they're doing a good job. And then you flip it over to the defensive side, and to me, that's where you would expect a former, TCU defensive coordinator to really make an impact. And that Midway defense has been flying around, making plays, just all season long. So that's the reason I really think that this Midway team has a shot to do something. I don't think they're going to be in Jerry World or anything like that, but I think this is a nice, first start under Joe Gillespie.
Yeah, I'm glad to see them doing well. They kind of struggled over the last couple of years, on and off field type deal. One team, and they're kind of in your peripheral, Hamilton. The Bulldogs have been really impressive this year. They go and they're going to play San Saba Friday night. That ought to be a good one. Valley Mills, Italy. I kind of like that game. Those two. That for I don't know when the last time they split all these Waco teams up into two different regions. It's kind of surprising that came out. That'll be a good a test for Valley Mills and see how good Italy is. Couple more had them. Dawson at Axtell. I think Axtell should handle them all right. What about Robinson Hillsboro? Do you think Hillsboro can D it up a little bit and slow down that offense? Or
I think that's going to be a really interesting game. I mean, well, Zach Smith will be at that game for us. You like to just go, oh, the Rockets are going to roll just because they just beat Glen Rose or
yeah,
whatever. But I mean, you still got to go out and play. And I mean, if we were just talking about West a minute ago, you look at what West did. They played triple overtime to Robinson. They lost by 2 points to Hillsboro. Those teams might be closer than we think.
yeah.
Robinson's playing at home. They may have found something with Moreno, but I do think Hillsboro's starting to figure some things out. So I like that as a low key sort of good game,
Yeah.
and probably one that'll tell us a little more about both teams.
Athens at Waco Conley. That's a little crawl. They're a 4AD2. They're 3-1. What do you done any work on that one? What do you think?
Yeah, Art Strickland, one of our freelancers, will be at that one, and yeah, I think the Cadets are playing pretty well. They always have a very run-heavy offense. Jamarian Vincent is obviously a special talent and a guy that makes plays all over the field for them. I like how Conley's playing, and this is a good test against a 3-1 Athens team. But playing at home, I don't think Conley has quite challenged itself on the same level that like La Vega has, obviously. But the Cadets are playing well, and you may be onto something in terms of Conley, La Vega, kind of as the teams to beat in that district. I'm throwing Robinson in that mix now, though. I mean that
You
win
got
over
to this year.
Glen Rose was eye opening for
Yeah,
me.
that's
I
impressive.
mean, so
I
yeah,
was happy
and
for Coach Lancaster and the Rockets to get that one, but not. Yeah, I think in your article, they got to avoid the letdown. Now that they got Hillsborough coming to town.
yeah, and obviously, you can't overlook China and you can't overlook Gatesville, and even a young Lorena team that's kind of rebuilding. Obviously Lorena would love to have like Braylon Henry, but
A lot of teams would like to have it. But
yeah, but kids graduate. That happens.
yeah.
So
Well, Brownwood, La Vega handled up them last week. Now they're going to be they're coming to China Spring, so maybe China Spring get a win and get a little bit more
mm-hmm.
confidence. I know the Battles kids have been playing well. They talked to some guys over there, and they just. I was told that in the second half of the university game they didn't run him as much because they were running him a ton, and but he's kind of that. Who's that quarterback they had a couple of years ago?
Major Bowden.
Yeah. So that kid ran the ball a lot, and it looks like that's the kind of type of offense they're going towards now. I think China Spring should get in that win column this week.
Yeah, I agree. La Vega kind of rolled over Brownwood last week, and Chad was at that game and said this was not a vintage Brownwood team. I think China Spring's still going to have to go out and play, but you're right. I mean, I saw Battles in that game against University, and he was tearing them up in the first half with those runs. He's really slippery. I mean, that's clearly the best part of his game is sort of his elusiveness and his running ability. Not quite the passer, obviously, that like a Cash McCollum is. They were spoiled in that regard, but I think they're coming along, and Tyler Beatty is a real sharp coach, and I think China Springs is one of those teams that's going to kind of get better as the season progresses. And you talk to any head coach, and that's like the goal. They all want to sort of get better from week to week, whatever the outcome is.
A couple more. So we talked about it. Grossbeck at Rockdale. I think the Goats. Rockdale. They're not.
Yeah, they're not
They're
bad.
3-1. They lost to Lexington, of course, 66-7, but not horrible. That ought to be a good one. And let's go. So when this game was scheduled, I thought this was going to be a barn burner or a great game. Little River Academy coming to Whitney. They lost their quarterback, Casey Mraz. Cavalli Neely transferred to Temple, so they're missing that running back. They're still scoring a lot of points. I was kind of impressed last week with Whitney's defense. Rogers came to town, and they only allowed really 7 points, but they did a sloppy cleanup touchdown at the end. Rogers was averaging 50 points a game, and I was really impressed how Whitney held them to 13. That game, I thought, when it was scheduled, I thought, well, that's going to be a good one. I think they tried to do a neutral field, Waco ISD or something, and it didn't work out. So that game's probably lost some of its luster, but that'll be one to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I think I like Whitney in that game. I mean, I think the Wildcats have been impressive all year. Before the season, oh gosh, way back sometime in the summer, I did a column where I was talking about just predictions and stuff for the season, and I thought Jonte Johnson would be kind of a sleeper, player. I mean, clearly he was good last year, but just in terms of getting more opportunities and really, building on those this year, and I think that has certainly proven to be the case. I mean, he's having a big year. So yeah, Whitney's going to be a fun team to watch going forward the rest of the year.
All right, Bryce, man, I appreciate you hopping on short notice. I'd like to have you back on, maybe talk playoffs or something.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, man, I appreciate it. Thank y'all.